Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Let's talk about Mayor Bloomberg. You have some strong feelings about another, and you're not alone, by the way, about another billionaire entering this race. He's already poured $31 million in advertising of his own money. There's no end in sight in terms of what he can put into the race. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders saying, as you might imagine, this is another guy trying to buy his way to the White House.
I mean, let's just start with a kind of like, what are the chances thing. So 1 out of 500,000 Americans is a billionaire, right? That's how distributed billionaires are in the general population. 1 out of 9 Democrats running for president is now a billionaire, right? You're 55,000 times kind of likelier.
With Tom Steyer.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you got a centimillionaire in John Delaney, who's still in the race. And I think it raises the question of, in a time when more and more Americans, including some on the right, are fed up of the consequences of manic hypercapitalism destroying the American dream, threatening the planet, destroying opportunity structures in their towns and communities around this country, people not being paid properly, people not having the kinds of public services they need to live a decent life. The idea that a plutocrat is the solution to the problems of 30 or 40 years of plutocracy is sort of laughable. And I think people are waking up to the idea that it doesn't matter if it's a good one or a bad one, that actually it's possible to start imagining a future in which the people making big decisions for America don't have to be rich saviors, don't have to be a Donald Trump or a Mike Bloomberg. And I understand there's an enormous character difference between them. But it's actually possible in a democracy to start thinking about leaders of real popular movements, not people who buy elections, as the people who might save us from this moment.
But wait, I'm sorry if I can interrupt. One of our richest presidents was Franklin Roosevelt. I mean, John F. Kennedy came from a very,
yes.
a very
and we should talk about that.
Very wealthy
one of the things that those folks did that is very different from a lot of the billionaires who run today and in public life today in general. FDR was a traitor to his class, famously, right? FDR created public policies that were very good for average Americans and not great for rich people. And what's so remarkable today is that you have so few people at the very top who are able to muster the same courage to do the same. If Michael Bloomberg had, for not just right now, but in his mayoralty and ever since, advocated for a set of public policies that would truly change the power equations in America, truly redistribute power and wealth downward away from the capture of the 1%, I would be sitting at this table saying, look, it doesn't matter what his background is, he has done the work to show that his views and his labor overwhelms background. But all of these people that you see in public life, at the very top, whether it's in philanthropy, whether it's now running for president, tend to rep their own interests and run as plutocrats protecting plutocracy. Michael Bloomberg has come out against wealth taxes. He's saying, it's going to make America like Venezuela. This is the kind of, plutes are going to plute, the way I always say. And what you have here is people who are actually ignoring the lesson of FDR that you raised, ignoring the way in which a rich person could, if they're thoughtful, transcend their own interests. And they're just running to, frankly, protect their own class.
Can I just say, with all due respect, what I'm listening to is why the Democrats run the risk of losing in 2020. There's a world of difference between someone like Mike Bloomberg, who came from modest circumstances, made his money honestly, and has given away a tremendous amount, not just financially, but also in terms of his own public service, and someone like Donald Trump, who inherited tens or hundreds of millions of dollars from his father. This is America. This is a land that believes in free enterprise. It's a land that believes that if you have a great idea, you can make it and you will be magnificently rewarded, and also expects that when you make it to the top of the income ladder, you give a tremendous amount back. Mike Bloomberg has given back $6 billion. That's more than Donald Trump has probably ever had,
right?
Close to having in his lifetime. And it's not, look, I mean, this whole line, like, plutes are going to plute, like, that's just the same sort of categorization of people I think that Donald Trump engages in. There's a world of difference between not only a Bloomberg and a Trump, but also, you know, among these people, like what their ideas are. Don't you want a Democrat who represents like middle class interests, which rather than just like soak the rich, they're all bad, they're against us, and have a kind of a spirit of class warfare in the Democratic Party?
A couple things. First of all, you don't need to tell me this is America. I'm from America, so I understand, and there's different values at stake in America, and we can all claim different values. The values I'm talking about are also American. Second of all, when you have someone like Mike Bloomberg, I agree with you that he's very different from Donald Trump. I agree with you there's a difference between starting your own business and inheriting money. But the argument that I have made in this book, and that I'm happy to send you a copy because you sound you sound pre, not post, is that even if you have given a bunch away, you have benefited from a system over the last 30, 40 years in this country. If you look at the data on the capture with the 1%, the 0.1%, it's simply too much. If you look at the 0.1%, holding now more wealth than the bottom 80% of Americans, the 1% getting 49% of new income. The data you know and that you and I both know, that the issue is, unless you are showing as a very wealthy person that you are breaking down that system, you are, in a sense, complicit in that system. But Michael Bloomberg has shown zero appetite, I'll let you finish, to fundamentally alter that system. And so to say that's America, my America is not an America in which most people who work 40 hours a week at the bottom half of the country do not anymore feel like they can move ahead, get education, get health care. That's not my America.
It is Tuesday, the 26th of November of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A little, small, scant dash, a mere pinch of smoked hot Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Hey, we have a problem up at the top. Apparently, Brett Stevens, Mr. Bedbug, wants to compare Bloomberg to FDR, but he was assuaged of that, indeed, because, indeed, FDR was a traitor to his class, and, look, Bloomberg is not. All right? Bloomberg is not. So it would be nice to have an FDR, but apparently today's plutocrats are not enlightened despots. Oh, yeah, they might have some liberal traditional tendencies, but at heart, it's really, they're gimmitarians, all right? They got to hold on to what they got, and look, once you start having to pay, what is it, 10 million in taxes or something, or 100 million in taxes, then that's when you got to get your calculator out to see how much you have left. I mean, hell, what if you only have 50 billion left over? Boy, how can you survive on that? Okay, well, they want to make that seemingly a class struggle. I guess maybe it is, but I like to think of it as a moral issue. What is right? We could attend to that, possibly, but then, once again, it just might be subjective, and that's how neighbors get along. One neighbor subjectively decides that maybe they might back off and be a good neighbor, instead of pushing. The level of projection also is astounding. I don't know why I engage the people I do here on these Facebook community pages, because it's not really representative of the population as a whole. The loudest people tend to be a minority. Now, I suppose on their side, they might look at someone like me and say, yeah, that guy's loud. He's not representative of America as a whole. Look at him. He's a commie. I'm a commie. I am accused of being a socialist and a commie, and I'm anti-capitalist. Well, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of capitalism. I like free enterprise better. But look, I've made some prudent investments. I developed property. You can't get much more capitalistic than that. Venturing into the risk of rehabbing, I'll say structures of architectural distinction. Indeed, it wasn't just a slap job. We did our research, and we had to have a certain level of skill. But also, when you're moving them, you're selling them. It's income property or what? There's a certain business acumen that endeavors into, well, shall we say, capitalistic endeavor. So it's laughable to say just because I would like to have equal protection and due process for all, that automatically makes me a socialist and a commie. And if I'm not a socialist and a commie, I'm also a Nazi. Because I was told in no undue terms that Nazi commie, it's all the same thing. I'm a Nazi commie. I was called a Nazi commie. I have Sophie Scholl as my Avi on my Twitter account. Yeah, of the White Rose Society. College students who decided to plaque up some leaflets and newsletters on the walls, and for that they were beheaded. Pretty much as a warning to any other, commie socialist nincompoop. Is that a German word, nincompoop? So, it's laughable. Nazi commie. Did these people go to school? I don't think so. They are pliable. Very pliable. And then we have the LaRouches. There's some, ones who actually did go to school. Libertarian types. Love Rand Paul and Ron Paul and Lyndon LaRouche. Now let's be clear about Lyndon LaRouche. Lyndon LaRouche is really, that group has been doing active Russian measures for decades. Talk about conspiracy theories. So it's laughable that all this impeachment inquiry is we are following down the rabbit hole into some sort of weird conspiracy theory that doesn't exist. And we are up against Russian agitprop on the local level. Either by dupes, which is what I think it is. I don't think that people are actually getting marching orders from Vlad, but there are bots who have come through these community pages, obvious bots, and they've been exposed. And of course, there's been those bots have some real people, and they're able to manipulate the algorithm and get people like me and others of the resistance, really the indivisible types who have been on some of these pages, have been blocked and muted. So we're incapable of being able. We have to communicate with those who have not been blocked or muted, so we can figure out what a conversation is. Because there's no way to refute what they've done because they take over the pages. And oftentimes the administrators don't know what's going on and can't believe that what is happening is happening. Because usually administrators, this is a vanity type project and they're not paying attention. Who can blame them? But it doesn't seem like Zuckerberg's doing very much about it. And indeed, simply by bringing up the fact that a bot is a bot can get you muted and blocked enough that you're not able to take part in the conversation. So that those who are left, if they are prone to being pliable types, are cemented as such. So it's getting more sophisticated. It's going to be a lot harder to figure out who the bots are, and I would think that now those who call us trolls are the trolls. This is the other one, too, is that for some reason, we are violent leftist socialist commie Democrats because we want to go to the ballot box. And for some reason, in their addled brains, that is a violent act. We are going to come and kill them. I'm not kidding. This is the terminology they use, that we're violent and we're going to kill them as soon as we take over. All we want to do is continue the great experiment by going to the ballot box, and somehow that is a violent act. And I say that is projection. Because when they don't get what they want, it won't be the ballot box that is a deciding factor in their behaviors. It will be the bullets in their guns. They want to decide what is polite conversation. And if you say something untoward to them or their leader, there will be consequences. The threats are being made and they are being ignored. Well, in the case here, who do we go to? The Oath Keeper sheriff here in the county and also the county over? Do we go to them? Who do we go to? Well, I still have a certain level of a feeling of invincibility still, and I know it's stupid, but I'm not afraid to call it out, and so we need to call it out. And anyway, I've been threatened since, long before high school. My life, my physical being threatened with physical extermination. Enough that cops had to become involved. And that was at an early age. Why? Just because I thought that black and brown people should be able to register to vote. Apparently that's a violent act. Violent enough that I was put on a list to be killed. And the cops had to investigate, and, it was rather interesting. But as a kid, I didn't understand the ramifications of it, and I came to understand over time, because even younger, we had crosses burned on our lawn. Why? We were just trying to get black and brown people the ability to vote when they couldn't. Among other things. Maybe like protesting the war might have had something to do with it, because, you don't go against the military, except when you can use them as props. So, went against the military by trying to keep them alive. Jeez. And then when they came back, totally ignored. The only people helping them out were all of us anti-war protesters, because we knew what the hell they went through. So, I'm all over the place, but it's all coming to a head. This is somewhat get back for Watergate, indeed. A federal judge ruled that McGahn has to testify, and of course we know that it's going to be appealed to the appeals court and then all the way up to SCOTUS. And what is Barr going to argue? He's going to argue that indeed presidents are kings. That has to be his argument. Because in that decision, it was stated explicitly, presidents are not kings in America, and we are not subjects by blood or loyalty, that he, and it's all, the king is a he, that the king has some sort of divine right to rule over. Barr with his Opus Dei vision. I don't know. I think that Opus Dei vision isn't a stairway to heaven. I think it's like, the levels of hell, really. But regardless, his Opus Dei vision of a president as a king, that leaders rise because of divine intervention. What if it's just genetics? No. Because how do you explain a Trump? Well, maybe it is genetics. Maybe to get that rich and lose it and still be able to move about within those circles, you have to have a certain kind of deviant attitude. And maybe that's genetically imprinted. I will just say honestly that learning can overcome genetic predisposition. I kind of believe that. But you gotta wanna. Don't you? Don't you? Okay. Well, of course, once again, Bloomberg is not FDR, and what the hell is he running for? Because I think they really do fear not Joe. They don't fear Joe. They don't fear Bernie. And I'll tell you, they don't even fear Elizabeth Warren. But you know who they do fear? Yeah, Kamala is rising. We don't hear it because the polls are kind of weird, aren't they? And media coverage has a certain level of determination in our politics now on who is recognized as rising. But mark my words, Kamala is there and they fear her. And if they don't fear her as President of the United States, they certainly fear her as Attorney General. Because she will be a defender of the Constitution then. And, of course, in the right-wing Trump bro Colt 45 mind, defending the Constitution is a violent act against them. Well, let's show them what democracy really is. Shall we not? What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays? Well, hardcore Trump apologist Mo Babbling Brooks claimed subpoenaed impeachment witnesses testifying against Trump are breaking the law. Oh, yeah, he says they're politicking while on the clock. Really now? Well, that's Babbling Brooks for you. A U.S. general defied Trump's claims that ISIS is, quote, 100% defeated by confirming American troops are still fighting in Northern Syria, so he might have to resign. And the Ukraine scandal is part of Trump's war on experts and his overall desire to deconstruct the administrative state. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Chinese news outlets have conspicuously avoided any details of Hong Kong's democratic election landslide. Conspicuously. And thieves circumvented overnight security measures and made away with a trove of priceless jewels in a lightning raid on one of Europe's greatest collection of treasures at Dresden's Green Museum. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is our link to our Patreon page, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. We would be unable to do this without you, and thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. Do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime, in which then I get that linked up on social media for your social media linky pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Okay, well, I took a long time ranting at the top, but sometimes it has to be done. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Josh Israel out of the American Independent. Representative Mo Brooks, Repug of Alabama, a man once scored as the least bipartisan member of Congress, is angry that the impeachment inquiry hearings into Trump's alleged illegal dealings with Ukraine might help the Democrats. So he made the creative suggestion that by testifying against Trump, members of the administration might be improperly engaging in partisanship. In a radio interview, Brooks argued that because the impeachment hearings could help the Democrats, administration officials taking part are essentially engaging in political activity on the job. That's the kind of American civics they must be teaching down there in Alabama. The Democrats are doing their utmost to use federal tax dollars to illegally engage in opposition research in order to enhance their chances in the 2020 elections, Brooks charged. Really now? Instead of Trump, what about all that money from his inaugural committee? Mo, please. Asked by conservative host Dale Jackson whether administration officials testifying might be violating a federal law that limits partisan activity by members of the executive branch, he suggested that it could come close. So this is what Barr is going to argue in front of the Supreme Court. Well, he's got a couple of sycophants there, Brett, Neil. Hey, buddies. Well, now, of course, Brooks says that it has a partisan effect. Certainly. Well, of course it does, because his party is willing to sell out America and choose the Russian side. In fact, we even had Tucker Carlson saying he hopes Russia wins before the outrage got into his little earpiece and he had to walk that back some. Mo Brooks, nah. He's not walking back anything. Even that John Kennedy pool guy had to walk back his charge. Oh, yeah, it was Ukraine. Russian agitprop. Well, Brooks acknowledged that because they are under subpoena, meaning these witnesses, they'd likely not run afoul of the strict text of the law. If they were to openly say anti-Republican, anti-Trump things outside of being subject to a subpoena or a call to a hearing, there would be that risk. Now, what he's referring to is the Hatch Act. And that's from 1939. And what is the Hatch Act? Well, of course, it's an anti-corruption law that bars executive branch officials from using government resources for political campaigning or engaging in electioneering when on the clock. And the concern is ironic, given that the Trump administration has been admonished repeatedly for ignoring the Hatch Act, essentially refused to enforce its provisions against Trump appointees, calling the law an attack on free speech. Cy Martin, also of the American Independent, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A U.S. general told reporters over the weekend that U.S. troops will continue fighting ISIS in Northern Syria for the foreseeable future, the New York Times reported yesterday, Monday. We don't have an end date, General Kenneth F. McKenzie, commander of the Military Central Command, told reporters in Bahrain when asked how long U.S. troops would remain in the region. The statement came as the Times reported U.S. troops resuming large-scale military operations against ISIS in northern Syria. In March, Trump announced ISIS had been 100% defeated in Syria. Yeah, 100% defeated in Syria. Hours after that announcement, CNN showed footage of American troops battling ISIS. Speaking to reporters, McKenzie said ISIS still has the power to injure, still has the power to cause violence. In October, Trump announced the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Northern Syria, effectively green-lighting a Turkish military operation targeting Kurdish-led forces in the region. Kurdish fighters were long-standing American allies in a fight against ISIS, but Turkey considers many of them to be extremists. Terrorism experts conclude that Trump's abandonment of Kurdish allies in the region was a boon for ISIS, helping its captured fighters escape from prison and giving the group an opportunity to rebuild. Over the next days and weeks, the pace will pick back up against remnants of ISIS, McKenzie told the Times, despite Trump's promise to withdraw American troops from the region. In October, Trump declared, "Oil is secured. Our soldiers have left and are leaving Syria for other places, then coming home." No, they're not. He's a lying Bone Spur cadet, isn't he? However, other American troops stationed nearby were quickly deployed to northern Syria to protect oil fields from falling under ISIS control. Trump's pledge to pull troops from the region has not been entirely empty. McKenzie told reporters this past weekend that Trump's actions over the past several months had resulted in roughly 500 fewer troops in northern Syria. Offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes out of the American Independent, this time by Lisa Needham. Since taking office, Trump has waged a war against the administrative state, attempting to destabilize and undermine government agencies. Of late, when he isn't doing that, he's been trying to force Ukraine to investigate his political rivals. Trump has also busied himself with pushing the long-debunked conspiracy theory that Ukraine, not Russia, meddled in the 2016 election. At first glance, those things may seem unrelated. However, they're all of a piece. Trump's deep state rhetoric is part of his overall desire to dismantle the bureaucratic layer of government, and it's a desire shared by many ostensibly mainstream Republicans. The impeachment hearings have highlighted the necessity and wisdom of career civil servants. National Security Council advisor Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, the NSC's top expert on Ukraine, Fiona Hill, a former NNSC aide and Russia expert, and former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Marie Yovanovitch, who served as ambassador to multiple countries in multiple administrations, all gave well-versed and hard-earned expert testimony about Ukraine and Russia in recent days. Their testimony also revealed the extent to which Trump had ignored the expertise in favor of allowing Rudy Giuliani, Lev Parnas, and Igor Fruman, none of whom have any background in foreign policy, to conduct what was apparently State Department business in Ukraine. Giuliani and his associates subsequently worked to pressure Ukraine to launch investigations into Trump's opponents and pursue discredited theories. And the GOP appears to have wholeheartedly signed on to those theories. Devin Nunes, the ranking member on the House Intel Committee, spent most of the public impeachment hearings pushing similar conspiracies as the one by John Kennedy on Fox News. Declined to agree that the intelligence community's unanimous conclusion that Russia meddled in the 2016 election, asserting instead that it could also be Ukraine. Now, as I mentioned earlier, he has walked that back, because apparently it's not playing very good in Peoria, Alabama, Louisiana, or anywhere. Once people start thinking about it, they're counting on a couple of generations having no experience with the Cold War. I know Russia is not Soviet anymore, but the same kind of gangland mentality that was in the KGB has manifested itself by Vladimir Putin in his position of power. We've got to be clear on this. We are being attacked. And the longer we take acknowledging that, the more they, and I say that with a capital T, in Cyrillic, by the way, the more they become entrenched, it's going to be harder to wrench our democracy away from mob hands. All right, we better get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, The Terminator returns to form. In a season of reboots, it isn't quite accurate to classify Tim Miller's Terminator Dark Fate as one. Yet it isn't exactly a direct sequel either. This movie picks up where Terminator 2 ended. John and Sarah Connor have successfully warded off the threat of Skynet, but they haven't quite changed the future. Instead, another project has led to a rise of machines as well, and there's a full-scale war between them and humans in the future because, as Sarah wryly observes, humans seldom learn from their mistakes. The Terminator robots are still very real, and this time one has been sent back to kill a young Mexican woman, Danny Ramos, played by Natalia Reyes, who Sarah cynically points out is the new Sarah Connor. Sent back in time to protect her is Grace, a human-born soldier whose enhancements have made her into a cyborg. Grace has superhuman strength and abilities, but they come at a cost. Although Schwarzenegger is back as the T-800 with a surprising new identity and a human named Carl, Terminator Dark Fate is mainly concerned with the women. Combining sharp editing and some smart humor, it manages to be surprisingly relatable amidst the violence. As we see, time has not been terribly kind to Sarah. Without spoilers, she may have saved humankind from its fate, but it has taken a toll on her. We aren't surprised when she reveals to Grace that most of her time not battling Terminators is spent getting drunk to forget. While Linda Hamilton is as good as ever as Sarah Connor, it's Mackenzie Davis as Grace who is the real standout. Davis, best known for her TV work, is nothing short of amazing. Terminator Dark Fate, much like last year's Halloween, is an offering that gets its franchise back on track. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Modern painters usually get art supplies from a store. You want red paint, you buy red paint. But thousands of years ago, indigenous artists in what went on to become British Columbia actually cooked a slurry of aquatic bacteria to produce their distinctive red paints.
Well, yeah, it was a long time ago. There was no, there were no art stores. But yeah, that's what really got us interested in exploring it further because it was just such a complex series of steps to produce this paint.
Brandy McDonald. She works in archaeological science at the University of Missouri Research Reactor. That's a nuclear reactor used for studies in a wide variety of disciplines. The paint MacDonald examined was on a fragment of ancient rock art from central British Columbia. Indigenous artists there had used a distinctive ochre pigment to paint rocks with designs of otters, fish, caribou, beavers, and canoes. Under an electron microscope, MacDonald saw tiny tubules in the paint, structures produced by a particular microbe, and that tipped her off that the iron oxide pigment might be of biological origin. She later determined the pigment was produced by the aquatic bacterium Leptothrix acracia.
It kind of floats as this brownish, auburn, orangish algal mat, at the surfaces of little freshwater streams. And so it takes iron out of, iron-enriched water and uses that to produce energy to grow these little colonies.
But the substance wasn't just straight bacterial paint. The microscopic structure looked like it was cooked, too, to make the pigment more durable and color-fast. To test that idea, MacDonald and her team actually went out and gathered mats of this bacterium from a stream in Maine. They heated it under the electron microscope, and they saw that the materials in the pigment crystallized, changes they'd also seen in the original sample, and that would make the paint more resistant to breaking down. The results and links to incredible videos of that bubbling, cooking pigment are in the journal Scientific Reports. MacDonald's team is now working with indigenous communities in central British Columbia to learn more about the history of rock art there and how it was produced, and to share these new microscopic insights into this ancient art. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1867. That was the day that J.B. Sutherland of Detroit patented the first specialized refrigerated railroad car. Sutherland's design included ice tanks at both ends of the car and ventilation flaps on the floor, which used gravity to send a draft of cold air flowing throughout the car. Sutherland could find no investors interested in financing his railroad cars on the railroad lines. However, in 1868, William Davis devised a newer refrigerated car which allowed meat and poultry to be shipped across the United States. Davis sold his refrigerated car patent to George H. Hammond. Hammond was a Detroit meat packer. He used the new car to transport meat from Michigan to Boston. Hammond became a meat shipping tycoon because of Davis's invention. Refrigerated cars revolutionized the meat packing industry. Previous methods of shipping meat were not the best. Gustavus Swift, a Chicago meatpacking owner, had tried using bins of ice in boxcars and went so far as attempting to use boxcars with no doors to keep the meat cool. Finally, Swift perfected the refrigerated boxcar, improving on the ideas of both Sutherland and Davis. The Swift meatpacking operation was located on the south side of Chicago. The refrigerated car centralized meatpacking and helped to make Chicago, as poet Carl Sandburg wrote, the hog butcher for the world. At its peak, the stockyards employed more than 50,000 workers. One Swift competitor, Armour & Company, could butcher more than 1,200 hogs an hour. During the 1890s, 12 million cattle and hogs were slaughtered in Chicago, and the meat was distributed throughout the nation by rail car. The stockyards became an important site of labor organizing, especially for the Congress of Industrial Organizations in the late 1930s.
I read the news today, oh boy. It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
A federal judge ruled Monday that former Trump White House counsel Don McGahn must comply with a House subpoena to testify before Congress. The White House argued that McGahn is, quote, absolutely immune from compelled congressional testimony about his work for Trump. The judge, Ketanji Brown Jackson, rejected that claim, writing in a 120-page decision, quote, presidents are not kings. They do not have subjects bound by loyalty or blood whose destiny they are entitled to control, end quote. The Justice Department said it would appeal. McGahn's lawyer said McGahn will comply with Judge Jackson's decision unless it is stayed pending appeal. The case could lead to forced testimony by numerous officials in the House impeachment inquiry, including national security officials. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton has indicated that he has significant information on the Ukraine affair. Stay tuned. Speaking on Fox News on a segment of the Ingraham Angle, Trump ally Alan Dershowitz responded to the judge's statement, unbelievably saying this.
And then she went nuts, talking about how the president's not the king. Of course the president's not the king. The president's far more powerful than the king. The president has the power that kings have never had. He's very, very powerful office, and the framers wanted it that way. That's why they required for impeachment very strict criteria to be met. And we don't live in a parliamentary democracy where Parliament can just vote to remove a leader, a prime minister. So this decision itself has no big impact. All it means is people have to show up, and then they can invoke the privilege.
Really? House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff said Monday that the panels involved in the inquiry against Trump would send a report to the House Judiciary Committee in early December. Schiff said the report would include a list of White House refusals to cooperate with the investigation, noting that the failure to cooperate could result in a separate article of impeachment for obstruction of Congress. In a letter sent to members of Congress, Schiff wrote, quote, a dozen witnesses followed President Trump's order to defy lawful subpoenas, and the White House, State Department, Department of Defense, Office of Management and Budget, and Department of Energy have provided no documents in response to subpoenas. The Supreme Court on Monday issued a temporary stay of an appeals court ruling that required Trump's accounting firm to provide his tax returns to the House Oversight and Reform Committee. Trump's legal team now has until December 5th to file a formal petition for the Supreme Court to review the case. The Wall Street Journal is out with a bombshell about the federal investigation into Rudy Giuliani. They're reporting that subpoenas issued to people with ties to Trump's personal lawyer, Giuliani, and his associates indicate a broad federal investigation into possible money laundering, obstruction of justice, and campaign finance violations, and suggest that prosecutors are looking closely at the work of Giuliani himself. In recent weeks, they've sent subpoenas and other requests to potential witnesses seeking records and information related to Giuliani and two of his associates, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. And the subpoenas reportedly listed more than a half dozen potential charges under consideration for Giuliani, including obstruction of justice, money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, making false statements to the federal government, serving as an agent of a foreign government without registering with the Justice Department, donating funds from foreign nationals, making contributions in the name of another person, or allowing someone else to use one's name to make a contribution, along with mail fraud and wire fraud. Way to go, Rudy. Remember David Pecker? Who could forget a name like that? He heads up AMI, the company that publishes the National Enquirer. Well, we're now learning that Pecker has spoken with prosecutors with the New York District Attorney's Office as part of its investigation into the Trump Organization's handling of hush money payments to women who alleged affairs with Trump. Pecker's late October meeting with prosecutors could provide key details on discussions that took place involving Stormy Daniels, the adult film star who allegedly slept with Trump, and agreements that were made with former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen. Cohen is cooperating with the investigation. Pecker is expected to continue talking with prosecutors. The outgoing Secretary of Navy, Richard Spencer, sat for an interview Monday in which he told CBS News that he spoke with White House counsel Pat Cipollone on November 15th and proposed an arrangement in which Eddie Gallagher would be allowed to retire as a SEAL if the president agreed not to intervene in the case and, quote, let the Navy do its administrative work. Spencer said Cipollone called back the same day to decline the offer, saying the president would be involved. What a mess.
What were the ramifications of intervening in that review process?
Well, right now, we're not going to do it, is what Secretary Esper says. What message does that send to the troops?
Well, what message does it send?
That you can get away with things. We have to have good order and discipline. It's the backbone of what we do. And the Trident review process with the senior enlisted reviewing fellow senior enlisted is critical. The senior enlisted of our military are the backbone of our military. They are the girder of good order and discipline. They can handle this. They can handle this in each one of their communities.
As millions of Americans have already hit major delays on the road to get home to family for Thanksgiving due to insane weather around the country, the UN is out with a devastating new report that says the world is on track to warm by a potentially catastrophic 3.4 to 3.9 degrees Celsius. That comes out to about 7 degrees Fahrenheit by the year 2100. The only way to prevent the most catastrophic climate impacts is to quickly reverse this trend, a challenge that only gets harder the longer countries wait to take action. The group of 20, the G20 countries, account for about 78% of the world's emissions. Several are not on track to meet their individual climate pledges, including the United States and Canada. Here's the bad news. The report found that even if every country across the globe was on track to meet their climate targets, the world would still be headed to warming of more than 3 degrees Celsius by 2100. And finally, at least he did one thing right. Cases of extreme animal cruelty can now be prosecuted as federal crimes under the Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act, which was signed into law Monday by Trump. Go figure. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently hovering around 32 degrees Fahrenheit, expected to be much cooler today, only a high of about 40 to 41. We are expecting a mix of rain and snow, they're calling almost 3 inches of snow on top of a half an inch of rain. One or the other, and both. And we're going to have that happening all day. We're going to have a low in the upper 20s tonight with another 1 to 3 inches of snow overnight and a mixture of rain and snow showers tomorrow with snow accumulating less than 1 inch but expecting about an inch of rain. So, wow. And with all that said, we are in a winter storm watch and that wintry mix will continue. Pollen is rated at none. The air quality index is good at 26 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.96 inches. Visibility is down to 1/2 mile, and relative humidity is at 96%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 56 and cloudy. Paris is 56 and cloudy. Rome is 61 and sunny. Kyiv is 31 and cloudy. Kabul is 40 and fair. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 48 and merely cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 62 and clear. San Francisco, California is 45 and partly cloudy with a wind advisory. And New York, New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny all over the Big Apple. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters, and why would they not be anonymous? Their lives could be threatened, because this is a story about China, after all. And, okay, so out of Reuters, anonymous worker bees, major news outlets in China have largely avoided detailed reporting of district council election results in Hong Kong, where pro-democracy candidates scored a landslide victory that some say amounted to support for anti-government protests. Instead, some reports in China's tightly controlled media offered bare-bones facts about Sunday's elections, including how many seats were up for grabs and how many people had voted. One website, a leading economic and financial news provider with a reputation for hard-hitting reports, published a list of districts, candidates, and vote counts, but did not offer any context. However, the tone in editorials was firm. The China Daily newspaper said the result marks a setback for Hong Kong's democratic development, as the results were skewed by the illegal activities of the opposition camp to the benefit of their candidates.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Matthias Rischel of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Thieves smashed display cases and grabbed priceless jewels from an Eastern German museum in the early hours of Monday in a lightning raid on one of Europe's greatest collections of treasures. They forced their way into Dresden's Green Vault Museum and got away with at least 3 sets of early 18th century jewelry, including diamonds and rubies. Security camera footage showed 2 men breaking in through a grilled window. The alarm sounded just before 5 a.m., and officers were there 5 minutes later, but the burglars had escaped. It's impossible to sell such unique, identifiable items on the open market. It will be a terrible thing, Marian Ackerman, director of the museums, said. When asked whether the jewelry might be broken up or melted down, its cultural value far outstripped any material value, she added. The haul is worth about $1 billion. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.